Welcome back, everybody, to the Deep Dive.
Glad to be back.
So today we're going to be tackling a pretty hot topic.
Oh,
Yeah. Smoking versus non-smoking cannabis.
okay.
We're really going to try to unpack all the different nuances between these two,
Yeah.
like we always do on the show. So we're going to be looking at, a lot of different research,
Yep.
a lot of medical reviews,
Okay.
even some like anecdotal experiences
It's good.
to really give you, the listener, the full picture.
Yeah.
And we really want to focus on three main areas.
Okay.
Health, convenience, and effects.
Makes sense.
Because at the end of the day,
Yeah.
we want you guys to be like, true cannabis connoisseurs.
I like that.
So first up, let's talk about the elephant in the room,
Oh,
smoking.
yeah.
Now, we all know it's not the healthiest habit,
Right.
but what does the research actually say
Well,
about the impact of smoking cannabis on our lungs?
cannabis smoke, just like tobacco smoke, contains a lot of harmful combustion products. And there's this study in 1988.
Yeah.
It was published in Inhalation Toxicology of Vaping Products
Okay.
by Wu and some other researchers. And they basically found that smoking marijuana
Okay.
could lead to something called chronic bronchitis,
Okay.
which is similar to the effects of smoking cigarettes.
So pretty similar effects to smoking cigarettes.
Yeah, it's not surprising.
No, not
Well,
really.
there's always two sides to every story, right?
Right.
So I've also heard that cannabis might actually have some
Oh.
benefits for lung health.
Interesting.
Yeah, so there's this study from 1975,
Okay.
and it was called Acute Effects of Smoked Marijuana and Oral Delta-9 Tetrahydrocannabinol.
Catchy title.
Yeah, very catchy.
Yeah.
But anyway, it was by this guy Tashkin
Okay.
and his team,
Yeah.
and they found something pretty unexpected.
Okay.
Both smoked marijuana and oral THC
Mm-hmm.
actually cause this thing called bronchodilation.
Okay.
Where the airways kind of relax and open up in
Yeah.
people with asthma.
So it actually helped them breathe easier.
Yeah, kind of counterintuitive, right?
Very much so.
Like you'd think smoking would irritate the lungs,
Exactly.
but for some people with asthma, it actually helped.
So how does that work?
It's still being studied, but
Sure.
it seems like certain compounds in cannabis, like THC,
Mm-hmm.
interact with receptors in the lungs.
Right.
And that produces this like bronchodilating effect.
Okay.
So it's kind of like a complex
Yeah.
and potentially beneficial effect on the
Right.
respiratory system,
All right.
even when smoked.
So it's not as simple as saying smoking is bad.
Nope, definitely not.
Okay.
There are nuances.
Right.
Like this bronchodilation might offer temporary relief
Okay.
for some asthmatics,
Yeah.
but the long-term risks of those harmful combustion products are still a concern.
Right.
And, speaking of that inhalation toxicology of vaping products,
Mm-hmm.
cautioned that chronic inflammation from smoking
Right.
could lead to lung cancer and COPD.
Yeah.
So it's kind of a balancing act.
A balancing act for sure.
Yeah.
You have
yeah.
to weigh those potential benefits against the risks.
Right.
Okay. So we talked about THC.
Yeah.
What about other cannabinoids?
Like CBD.
Like CBD, exactly.
Yeah.
What's its impact on lung health?
Well, we're still, unraveling the mysteries of different cannabinoids.
Of course.
But research suggests that CBD
Mhm.
might have some protective properties for the lungs.
Oh, real?
There was a study published in Cannabis on cough and asthma,
Okay.
and they found that certain cannabinoids, including CBD,
Yeah.
exhibited anti-inflammatory and cough-suppressing effects.
Interesting.
Yeah, so even though smoking might introduce those harmful substances,
Right.
some components of cannabis
Yeah.
could potentially counteract those effects to some degree.
Okay. It's complex.
It is complex.
Yeah.
All right, so we've talked about smoking a bunch,
Yeah.
and it's not looking so great for our lungs,
Not the best.
right?
But what about people who want to avoid it altogether?
What are their options?
Yeah. What are the alternatives?
Well, vaping has become a popular alternative.
Yeah.
People are saying it's healthier,
Right.
and there's actually some truth to that.
Okay.
Vaping heats cannabis to a lower temperature
Yeah.
than combustion.
Mm-hmm.
So you're exposed to less of those harmful byproducts.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
So problem solved.
Well, hold on.
Okay.
Not so fast.
Uh-oh.
It might be less harmful, but it's not risk-free.
Okay.
We need more research to
Yeah.
really know the long-term effects of inhaling heated aerosols,
Right.
even without combustion.
Okay.
And even with vaping, you can lose some of the cannabinoids.
Oh, really?
Yeah, so you might not be getting the full potential of the plant.
I see. I see.
Yeah.
But if you're not burning it, how are you losing cannabinoids?
Well, even those lower temperatures in vaping
Mhm.
can degrade some of those, delicate cannabinoids and terpenes,
Okay.
which, contribute to those flavors and effects that everyone loves.
So it's not just about avoiding the smoke.
Right.
It's about getting the most out of those compounds.
Exactly.
Okay, so we've got smoking, we've got vaping. What about edibles?
Edibles are a whole different ball game. Instead of inhaling it, you're ingesting it.
Right.
So it's processed by your digestive system.
Okay.
That means a much longer onset time.
Really?
Yeah, sometimes up to 2 hours.
Wow.
According to that 1975 study we talked about earlier.
Okay.
You know, the one with the long name?
Yeah, the acute effects one.
That's the one.
2 hours is a long time.
Yeah, compared to smoking or vaping.
Right.
Yeah, things can get interesting if people aren't patient.
Yeah, I could see that.
And because edibles are metabolized differently,
Yeah.
the effects can be more intense and longer lasting.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So it's great if you want a gradual and sustained experience, but dosing can be tricky.
Okay.
You got to start low and go slow.
Good advice.
Yeah.
So patience is key with edibles. Are there any situations where edibles might be a better choice?
Yeah, definitely. Like for people who can't inhale anything, maybe they have a lung condition.
Right.
Or if they want a more discreet way to consume.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense.
No smoke, no vapor,
Right.
just good old-fashioned eating.
All right, so we've got smoking, vaping, edibles.
Yeah.
Each with their own pros and cons.
Really.
Now, what about people who are substituting cannabis for like harder substances?
That's a really interesting aspect. It's all about harm reduction,
Okay.
and it often gets overlooked.
Right.
There's this book called A Safer Alternative Cannabis Substitution as Harm Reduction.
Okay.
And it shares these personal stories of people who substituted cannabis for more addictive things like alcohol or opioids.
Wow.
And for them, it really helped reduce harm.
That's amazing.
Yeah,
So cannabis can be a valuable tool in harm reduction.
it can be.
But let's not forget about those psychoactive effects.
Oh, yeah, the getting high part.
Right.
A lot of people are concerned about that.
Yeah, for sure.
Does the consumption method make a difference?
That's a great question.
It does.
Okay.
THC is the main psychoactive component in cannabis, and it can impair things like thinking,
Yeah.
coordination reaction time.
Right.
But there's this 2024 meta-analysis called Does Acute Cannabidiol, CBD, impair performance?
Another catchy title.
Very catchy.
I love it.
Anyway, it was by Larry and some other researchers,
Okay.
and they found that CBD itself is unlikely to cause significant impairment,
Okay.
but it can make you feel a little sedated.
Interesting.
Yeah. So even CBD, which is often seen as non-psychoactive,
Right.
can have subtle effects.
Right.
How about we compare CBD to THC
Okay, yeah, let's do that.
in terms of impairment?
Yeah.
Well, the same study found that THC had a much bigger impact on impairment
Okay.
compared to CBD.
That makes sense.
Yeah, so it's something to keep in mind when choosing your method
Right.
and planning your activities.
Right. Because
Like smoking or vaping might hit you faster,
yeah.
which could mean a shorter duration of impairment,
Okay.
but edibles are slower, but the effects last longer,
So it depends how long you want to be impaired for.
basically.
Interesting.
Yeah, and everyone metabolizes these compounds differently.
Right.
So it's really about knowing yourself
I like that.
and doing your research.
That's great advice.
Thanks.
So making informed choices about cannabis requires a lot of self-awareness
It does.
and research.
Yeah,
What are your thoughts on that?
I totally agree. There's no one size fits all.
Right.
You got to understand your needs, your preferences, your risks, and most importantly,
What's that?
we need to acknowledge the limitations of current research
Okay.
and be critical of the information we come across.
Yeah, that's a great point.
Yeah,
We've covered a lot of ground in this first part,
we have.
but there's still so much more to explore.
For sure.
So stay tuned for part 2,
Okay.
where we'll dive deeper into the reliability of cannabis research
Looking forward to it.
and how to navigate this ever-evolving world of cannabis information.
Sounds good. All right, so welcome back
Back for more.
to our deep dive into cannabis.
As we continue, exploring all this stuff about consuming cannabis,
Yeah.
I keep thinking about the research.
Okay, yeah.
Like, how can we even be sure
Mm-hmm.
that the information we're getting is good?
Right.
Especially with all this new stuff coming out all the time.
It's a really important question.
It is.
And that's where critical thinking comes in.
Okay.
The research on cannabis is still pretty young,
Okay.
and it's not easy to do these studies.
What are some of the challenges?
Well, a big one is the legal status.
Right. It's still illegal in a lot of places.
Yeah, federally.
Yeah.
And that creates a ton of restrictions for scientists.
Oh, I see.
It's like they're trying to study with one hand tied behind their back.
Yeah, that makes sense.
And then there's the cannabis itself.
Okay.
It's not like a pharmaceutical
Yeah.
where everything is standardized.
Yeah.
The potency and chemical composition can be all over the place.
So like one batch might be totally different from the next.
Exactly.
Wow. That makes it really hard to compare studies.
It does.
Like one study might be using a high THC strain
Mm-hmm.
and another one might be using CBD.
Right.
How can you even compare those?
You can't really.
And then on top of all that,
Yeah.
everyone reacts to cannabis differently.
Exactly.
Our genetics, our tolerance.
Maybe in your mood that day can make a difference.
Wow. So it's super complicated.
It is.
So how do we even know what to believe?
You got to be skeptical.
Okay.
Look for studies that are published in reputable journals.
So not just any random website.
Nope.
Okay.
And be careful of sensationalized claims.
Like cannabis cures everything.
Exactly.
Yeah, you see that everywhere.
And look for balanced and objective reporting.
Okay, that makes sense.
You know, this reminds me of that Jamer review we talked about.
The 2015 one?
Yeah. Cannabinoids for medical use by Whiting and his team.
Right. They talked about some of these research limitations.
You did.
Like how it's hard to standardize the cannabis and the doses.
Mm-hmm.
Makes it hard to compare things.
Yeah. And they said we need more long-term data.
Especially for the newer stuff like vaping.
Exactly.
Sounds like we just need more research.
Yeah, we do.
Better research.
Yeah.
To really get a handle on all this.
It's a lot to figure out.
It is, but it's kind of exciting too.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
Like there's so much more to learn.
Absolutely.
So what's the takeaway here?
Be critical.
Okay.
Think for yourself.
Don't just believe everything you read,
Right.
especially about cannabis.
It's a complex plant.
It is.
And we're still learning.
This has been really eye-opening.
I'm glad.
It's clear that we need to go deeper,
Yeah.
question everything.
And be ready to change our minds as new information comes out.
Well said.
Thanks.
All right, so we're back
Back again.
for the final part of our deep dive.
Can you believe it?
I know it's flown by.
It has.
We've talked about the science, the different methods of
Our
consuming,
research challenges.
all that good stuff.
Yep.
And now we're going to zoom out a little.
Okay.
Look at the bigger picture.
The societal stuff.
Exactly.
It's a big conversation.
It is.
Especially now with legalization happening everywhere. More and more people are using cannabis.
It's like a whole new era.
It is.
But with that comes responsibility.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
You got to use it wisely.
Right. We need balance.
Balance.
Recognizing both the good and the bad.
Okay, so let's talk about young people.
Okay.
What's the impact of cannabis on them?
Well, their brains are still developing.
Right.
So there's a lot of concern about long-term effects.
From using it too early.
Exactly.
Okay.
There's research suggesting that if you use cannabis a lot, especially as a teenager,
Yeah.
it can mess with your cognitive development
Oh, wow.
and increase your risk of mental health problems.
So even though it's legal for adults,
Yeah.
it's not okay for kids.
Definitely not.
We need to be talking to them about the risks.
Education is key.
Help them make good choices.
Absolutely.
But what about pregnant women?
Another important group.
We know cannabis can affect the baby.
It crosses the placenta.
Right.
And while the research is still ongoing,
Okay.
some studies are finding some worrying links.
Like what?
Things like low birth weight,
Oh, wow.
premature birth,
Okay.
developmental delays.
That's scary.
It is. So caution is definitely needed.
And more research. We need to know more.
Absolutely.
So we've talked about the risks for young people and pregnant women.
Mm-hmm.
But what about that idea of using cannabis instead of harder drugs?
The harm reduction thing.
Right.
Yeah, that's becoming more popular, but
Okay.
it's not that simple.
Okay.
While cannabis might be less addictive, you can still develop a problem with it.
Oh, I see.
A cannabis use disorder.
So it's not risk-free,
Nope.
especially for people recovering from addiction.
Right? It could trigger a relapse.
Or just make things harder,
And sometimes using cannabis can mask other issues.
like mental health problems.
Exactly.
So it's not a cure-all.
It's not.
We need to be realistic about it.
And responsible.
Responsible.
No, the potential downsides.
Okay, so bottom line,
Cannabis can be a lot of things.
yeah,
But it's not a simple solution.
we need to use it with awareness,
And respect.
respect for the plant.
And for ourselves.
Well said.
Thanks.
This deep dive has been incredible.
I've learned so much.
Did you?
We've covered so much ground.
From the science to the personal stories.
The societal implications.
It's clear that cannabis is complex.
It really is.
It has its benefits and its risks.
And we're still learning.
As we enter this new era of cannabis,
Yeah.
we need to keep learning,
Stay curious.
stay informed.
And stay safe.
That's great advice.
Thanks.
So thank you all for joining us on this deep dive.
Yeah. Thanks for listening.
We hope you learned something new.
And had some fun along the way.
Until next time, stay curious, stay informed.